Although Wikipedia is not an authority, it is required to have citations. This means Wikipedia is a popular source of information and is credible enough to explore. Typing in Freemason into Wikipedia, we arrive at the site.
Freemasonry. Masonry consists of fraternal organizations that trace their origins to the local fraternities of stonemasons, which from the end of the 14th century regulated the qualifications of stonemasons and their interaction with authorities and clients. The degrees of Freemasonry retain the three grades of medieval craft guilds, those of Apprentice, Journeyman or Fellow, now called Fellowcraft, and Master Mason. The candidate of these three degrees is progressively taught the meanings of the symbols of Freemasonry, and entrusted with grips, signs and words to signify to other members that he has been so initiated. The initiations are part allegorical morality play and part lecture. The three degrees are offered by Craft, or Blue Lodge, Freemasonry. Members of these organizations are known as Freemasons or Masons. There are additional degrees, which vary with locality and jurisdiction, and are usually administered by their own bodies, separate from those who administer the craft degrees. The basic, local organizational unit of Freemasonry is the lodge. The lodges are usually supervised and governed at the regional level, usually coterminous with either a state, province, or national border, by a Grand Lodge or Grand Orient. There is no international, worldwide Grand Lodge that supervises all of Freemasonry. Each Grand Lodge is independent, and they do not necessarily recognize each other as being legitimate. Modern Freemasonry broadly consists of two main recognition groups. Regular Freemasonry insists that a volume of scripture is open in a working lodge, that every member profess belief in a supreme being, that no women are admitted, although, in some jurisdictions, those who transition to women after being initiated may stay, see below, and that the discussion of religion and politics is banned. Continental Freemasonry is now the general term for the jurisdictions which have removed some, or all, of these restrictions. Masonic Lodge. The Masonic Lodge is the basic organizational unit of Freemasonry. The lodge meets regularly to conduct the usual formal business of any small organization, pay bills, organize social and charitable events, elect new members, etc. In addition to business, the meeting may perform a ceremony to confer a Masonic degree or receive a lecture, which is usually on some aspect of Masonic history or ritual. At the conclusion of the meeting, the lodge might adjourn for a formal dinner, or festive board, sometimes involving toasting and song. The bulk of Masonic ritual consists of degree ceremonies. Candidates for Freemasonry are progressively initiated into Freemasonry, first in the degree of entered apprentice. Some time later, in a separate ceremony, they will be passed to the degree of Fellowcraft, and finally they will be raised to the degree of Master Mason. In all of these ceremonies, the candidate is entrusted with passwords, signs and grips, secret handshakes, peculiar to his new rank. Another ceremony is the annual installation of the master and officers of the lodge. In some jurisdictions, installed master is valued as a separate rank, with its own secrets to distinguish its members. In other jurisdictions, the grade is not recognized, and no inner ceremony conveys new secrets during the installation of a new master of the lodge. Most lodges have some sort of social calendar, allowing Masons and their partners to meet in a less ritualized environment. Often coupled with these events is the obligation placed on every Mason to contribute to charity. This occurs at both Lodge and Grand Lodge level. Masonic charities contribute to many fields, such as education or disaster relief. These private local lodges form the backbone of Freemasonry, and a Freemason will necessarily have been initiated into one of these. There also exist specialist lodges where Masons meet to celebrate events, such as sport or Masonic research. The rank of Master Mason also entitles a Freemason to explore Masonry further through other degrees, administered separately from the craft, or Blue Lodge degrees described here, but having a similar format to their meetings. There is very little consistency in Freemasonry. Because each Masonic jurisdiction is independent, each sets its own procedures. The wording of the ritual, the number of officers present, the layout of the meeting room, etc. varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The officers of the lodge are elected or appointed annually. Every Masonic lodge has a master, 2 wardens, a secretary and a treasurer. There is also a tiler, or outer guard, who is always present outside the door of a working lodge. Other offices vary between jurisdictions. Each Masonic lodge exists and operates according to a set of ancient principles known as the landmarks of Freemasonry. These principles have thus far eluded any universally accepted definition.
Wow, so far I have seen only a few similarities between Scientology and Freemasonry, and none of it having to do with a pyramid. Mainly secrecy and exclusion of outsiders until passing tests. In Scientology, a member has to go clear before moving up. In Masonry, they must also pass initiation levels in order to move up and learn the next secrets. Both groups also seem to present a certain, non-intrusive public front. Yet, I find that last part the most interesting. It states,
each Masonic lodge exists and operates according to a set of ancient principles known as the landmarks of Freemasonry. These principles have thus far eluded any universally accepted definition.
So there is no universally accepted definition, eh, really? Well, let's just see if we can't change that. In order to do so, we will need to collect more data, so, let us continue.
Joining a lodge. Candidates for Freemasonry will have met most active members of the lodge they are joining before they are initiated. The process varies between jurisdictions, but the candidate will typically have been introduced by a friend at a lodge social function, or at some form of open evening in the lodge. In modern times, interested people often track down a local lodge through the internet. The onus is on candidates to ask to join. While candidates may be encouraged to ask, they are never invited. Once the initial inquiry is made, an interview usually follows to determine the candidate's suitability. If the candidate decides to proceed from here, the lodge ballots on the application before he, or she, depending on the Masonic jurisdiction, can be accepted. The absolute minimum requirement of any body of Freemasons is that the candidate must be free, and considered to be of good character. There is usually an age requirement, varying greatly between Grand Lodges, and, in some jurisdictions, capable of being overridden by a dispensation from the Grand Lodge. The underlying assumption is that the candidate should be a mature adult. Additionally, most Grand Lodges require the candidate to declare a belief in a supreme being. In a few cases, the candidate may be required to be of a specific religion. The form of Freemasonry most common in Scandinavia, known as the Swedish Rite, for example, accepts only Christians. At the other end of the spectrum, liberal or continental Freemasonry, exemplified by the Grand Orient de France, does not require a declaration of belief in any deity, and accepts atheists, a cause of discord with the rest of Freemasonry. During the ceremony of initiation, the candidate is expected to swear, usually on a volume of sacred text appropriate to his personal religious faith, to fulfill certain obligations as a Mason. In the course of 3 degrees, new Masons will promise to keep the secrets of their degree from lower degrees and outsiders, and to support a fellow Mason in distress, as far as practicality and the law permit. There is instruction as to the duties of a Freemason, but on the whole, Freemasons are left to explore the craft in the manner they find most satisfying. Some will further explore the ritual and symbolism of the craft, others will focus their involvement on the social side of the lodge, while still others will concentrate on the charitable functions of the lodge. Other degrees, orders, and bodies. Blue Lodge Freemasonry offers only 3 traditional degrees, and in most jurisdictions, the rank of past or installed master. Master Masons are also able to extend their Masonic experience by taking further degrees, independent bodies approved by their own Grand Lodge. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite is a system of 33 degrees, including the 3 Blue Lodge degrees, administered by a local or national Supreme Council. This system is popular in North America and in continental Europe. The York Rite, with a similar range, administers 3 orders of Masonry, namely the Royal Arch, Cryptic Masonry, and Knights Templar. In Britain, separate bodies administer each order. Freemasons are encouraged to join the Holy Royal Arch, which is linked to Mark Masonry in Scotland and Ireland, but separate in England. Templar and Cryptic Masonry also exist. In the Nordic countries, the Swedish Rite is dominant, a variation of it is also used in parts of Germany. Ritual and symbolism. Freemasonry describes itself as a beautiful system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. The symbolism is mainly, but not exclusively, drawn from the manual tools of stonemasons, the square and compasses, the level and plumb rule, the trowel, among others. A moral lesson is attached to each of these tools, although the assignment is by no means consistent. The meaning of the symbolism is taught and explored through ritual. All Freemasons begin their journey in the craft by being progressively initiated, passed and raised into the 3 degrees of craft, or Blue Lodge Masonry. During these 3 rituals, the candidate is progressively taught the meanings of the lodge symbols, and entrusted with grips, signs and words to signify to other Masons that he has been so initiated. The initiations are part allegory and part lecture, and revolve around the construction of the Temple of Solomon, and the artistry and death of his chief architect, Hiram Abiff. The degrees are those of entered apprentice, Fellowcraft and master mason. While many different versions of these rituals exist, with at least 2 different lodge layouts and versions of the Hiram myth, each version is recognizable to any Freemason from any jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions, the main themes of each degree are illustrated by tracing boards. These painted depictions of Masonic themes are exhibited in the lodge according to which degree is being worked, and are explained to the candidate to illustrate the legend and symbolism of each degree.
So far, we know that Freemasons supposedly emerged from guilds that began forming in the 14th century in Western Europe. They acted as intermediaries between clients and the craftsmen who would build what the clients wanted. This is exactly identical to a union today. In practice, this would be the same thing as living in a neighborhood where one of the neighbors owns a professional carpentry business, or landscaping business. When a different neighbor hires a worker outside of the neighborhood for any reason, it could be price, skill level or no reason at all, then the neighbor who owns a company but was not hired, sees the competition, and he converses with all the other neighbors and pressures the competition to leave the neighborhood. Further, he coerces through corporate pressure everyone in the neighborhood to agree to only use his company. This is the same thing as a guild. So, let's say, many of these types of anti-free market people group together into a craft guild. It could be art, theater or construction, and they force others to hire only them through power and threat. Then let's say, they also entrench themselves into the government through similar coercive methods, so that, only they receive the contracts for the public works. For example, in exchange of winning a contract at their set price, they promise all members will vote for a particular candidate. Now we have clearly outlined what a guild is. It's anti-free market and communistic in application. This is why the party of the left is associated with unions, since they cannot compete without these private agreements. Further, we know that in Scientology there are levels of ascension until you become an official operating thetan. In Masonry, we also see that there are 33 levels in the most popular sect, so too we see a pyramidal shape in Masonry. Here there are 3 levels leading up to Master Mason, awarded at the initial lodge, called the Blue Lodge, then there are 30 more levels to be acquired after that. As we move up the pyramid, we see Elu, of 9, at the 9th degree, Elu of 15 at the 10th, and Elu of 12 at the 11th. Elu is close to the Hebrew word for the month of Elul, but likely refers to a variation of the Hebrew Eli, meaning God, so to mean, God of 9, or Master of 15, or meaning to move up, ascend, to 12. Next, we see that name Solomon again, at level 13, in the Royal Arch of Solomon. At level 14, we see, for the first time a direct connection to the Jewish people, namely the letter Resh. Resh is the 20th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And look, it's inside our first triangle. Continuing up, we begin to see more connections to our original questions. The 16th degree is Prince of Jerusalem, the 18th is Knight of the Rose Cross, in the 21st, we see Noah, from the Hebrew Torah, at 23 and 24, we see Tabernacle, also from the Torah. At 30, we see Night Kadosh, which means, Holy Night. At level 32, we see the double-headed eagle behind upside-down triangle, our second triangle so far. Then finally, we arrive at the top. where we find an eye, identical to the pyramid we found at Eilat, and the Israeli Supreme Court. I qualify operating thetan, and a 33rd degree, have the same meaning. When we look into secular psychology 101, we find this same idea in the form of a pyramid-like structure until reaching a point of ascension and power at the top. We refer to this idea as transcendency, meaning existence or experience beyond the physical level. These ideas are not unique to Masonry or Scientology. The difference is, in psychology the application of this concept is subjective. It relates to your own personal well-being and it is universally applicable to all humans. First, all humans need food and nourishment, then a safe living environment, then you need sex and affection, after that you need employment, then you will need creative application of your mind like a job that requires the maximum of your cognitive capacity, then you need to satisfy your eyes with beauty and elegance, after that comes self-actualization. Meaning you have become everything you expected from your life, at which point you can help others from a place of transcendence. Only after you have taken care of yourself can you ever help others. Whereas in Freemasonry, Scientology and most every other organization in the world, the application of the pyramidal hierarchy is imposed on others without their voluntary agreement at its inception. It exists when we are born, and the people who ascribe to it are a threatening force, either join them or be crushed by them, since they believe they are the real power force of the world. Moreover, we know L. Ron set up Scientology as an autonomous organization capable of self-governance. He saw that the only way to really make money was to set up a religion. In this same way, Scientology and Freemasonry are hierarchical like the Catholic Church. The levels of hierarchy are defined, but not imposing, until necessity requires, wherein they galvanize into councils comprising the highest ranked members. We've pretty much determined what a Mason is, but we still don't know what it's all about. For us, the true free men of the world, we will need to decipher the meanings of the paintings in order to understand what secret they are really hiding. First